This is WorkSpan TV. I'm Ryan Johnson from World at Work. I'm joined today by Professor Barry Gerhart at the University of Wisconsin-Madison to talk about whether intrinsic motivation is crushed by individual pay for performance. And this is based on a paper that you wrote, Barry, in the August 2012 issue of the International Journal of Human Resource Management. So in the last few years, obviously with Dan Pink and other popular authors writing about how intrinsic motivation can be dampened by pay for performance, you've actually concluded something different. What is your article saying? What are the problems with this?
It's a good issue to have in front of us, that motivation's not just about pay. So there's a history of people before Daniel Pink, Alfie Kohn in the Harvard Business Review years ago that have raised this issue. The concern is that they've probably taken it too far in arguing that pay for performance actually harms or undermines intrinsic motivation. So let me start by defining intrinsic motivation. It's an activity you do because it's inherently interesting, engaging, or enjoyable. So it might be something like doing a puzzle. Extrinsic motivation is motivation that comes from receiving an outcome that's separable from the job or task that you're doing. So that kind of outcome, of course, would be money, pay for performance, could be praise, but it's not something you get automatically from doing the task. The argument that paying somebody to do an interesting, intrinsically motivating task will actually diminish their intrinsic motivation. Most of that research has been done using children or students, so typically in school settings. In fact, really none of it's been done in the workplace. Even the research that's been done in school settings, there's some debate about whether this undermining effect of pay for performance on intrinsic motivation is actually in existence there. Let me just put that aside and say, okay, for the sake of argument, let's accept there is an undermining effect in that setting, not in the workplace, but in schools. So there's a couple things we can look at there. One is, how big is that effect? So even if you believe the study which shows the biggest negative effect, the effect size would be termed small by typical standards. What that research doesn't study is total motivation, so intrinsic plus extrinsic. It also doesn't study performance. It's very possible that even if you had a detrimental effect of pay for performance on intrinsic motivation, that it would still have a very positive effect on total motivation and a very positive effect on performance. And in fact, we do have workplace studies which look at the effect of pay for performance on performance. Positive effect sizes on performance are about 2 to 3 times larger than the narrow studies of negative effects. Even if there is a negative effect of pay for performance on intrinsic motivation, at least in the workplace, pay for performance generally seems to have a pretty positive effect on performance. I think at a lot of better companies, people do interesting, intrinsically motivating work, and they expect to get paid well when they do well at it.
So one of the arguments that you've obviously advanced here in this paper is that a lot of the research that is cited in these popular studies is not occurring in the real workplace. This is occurring in the laboratory, as you said, in the schools. So you did some research that was published again in August 2012 that was in the workplace. And what did you find with your co-researcher?
Yeah, we used 6 different companies that had different degrees of strength of pay for performance. And the standard hypothesis would be the companies that emphasize stronger pay for performance, their employees would be less intrinsically motivated. We actually took the classic theory developed by DC and colleagues called cognitive evaluation theory, and we reasoned that in the workplace, actually we would not expect to find a negative effect. That we would expect that if you pay for performance, it'll do 2 things, and these are part of DC's theory. The more I'm paid for performance, the more competent I feel. And the more I'm paid for performance, the more I feel I have control over the workplace and what my pay is. So the problem that, that people like Kohn and Pink see comes from DC's theory, which says pay for performance can decrease autonomy and make people feel controlled. And in that case, they do not feel intrinsically motivated. But we don't believe that's how it works in the workplace. We actually found that people working in companies with stronger pay for individual performance had higher feelings of autonomy. They felt less controlled, and they had higher feelings of competence. So there were positive effects, and then those positive effects in turn led to people feeling more intrinsically motivated in companies that paid for performance. In a laboratory, you randomly assign people to treatments, so I either get paid or I don't get paid for doing this intrinsically motivating task. In the workplace, people assign themselves. They self-select, and then companies, of course, also select who will work for them. People who don't want to work under pay for performance will tend to go to companies that don't offer it, and people who do will go to companies that do offer it. The people who want to work under pay for performance, it's pretty unlikely that there's going to be a lot of negative effect from them going to a company where they've chosen to work.
Any advice to the practitioner who's watching this? Obviously the World at Work member who's watching this is in the comp department. I think what I'm hearing is don't abandon your pay for performance scheme.
I think it's unlikely that most companies are going to do better by de-emphasizing pay for performance, rewarding achievement. My advice for practitioners is don't be too swayed by any one book author or commentator. At the same time, it's useful to think of what you can take away from people like Pink and Kohn and the work of DC, and I think that is money's not the only thing that motivates. It's total rewards, a big part of it's pay, but there's other ways to motivate people, and don't forget about those by any means.
I want to thank Professor Barry Gerhart from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and the article is in August 2012 in the International Journal of Human Resource Management by Professor Gerhart, and your co-author is?
Meiyu Fang at National Central University in Taiwan.
Thanks again, Professor Gerhart.
My pleasure.
For
Thank
Workspan
you.
TV, I'm Ryan Johnson.